Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So simple.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome back to the InSession Film Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan McQuaid.
And I'm Jay Ledbetter.
And we're back for another review down the director's series rabbit hole for another film in our Wong Kar-wai Movie Series. We're here to talk about Fallen Angels. Jay, Are you excited? Are you ready for this one? I feel like we've got a lot to top after last week.
Oh, boy. Well, after last week, where I think Ryan said 15 words about the actual movie, but...
I think it was 20.
Is that overstating it?
Check the word count. I think it was at least 20.
Yeah. No, this one I certainly think we will have.
You know what movies are coming out in May? Let's break them down.
Oh yeah, let's run through it.
No, we're not going to do that today.
No, we're going to actually talk about this movie, and I'm excited to talk about it. I mean, I love nothing more than a Fallen Angel.
Why do you like a Fallen Angel?
It's just dramatically captivating.
I just wanted you to fill it in yourself.
Read the Bible, my guy.
I'll get it on audiobook. Who do you think reads the audio book for the Bible? Who do you think?
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people listen to the Bible on their way to work.
But like who does the narration for it, you think?
Oh, that's a good question.
That is a good
James
question.
Woods.
I was just going to say like Terrence Malick or something. Oh, Terrence Malick would be interesting.
Let me ask you this. Who's your favorite biblical figure? Who are your guys?
Who are my guys?
Yeah, in the Bible.
Oh, in the Bible. I thought you meant like in film.
No, in the Bible.
I don't know. I mean, obviously Jesus is pretty cool.
He's one of the big ones.
He's kind of the GOAT, you know. We were talking before this about who's the basketball GOAT. Kind of unarguable who the GOAT is from the Bible. Right?
Honestly, pretty big figure in the Bible. I do agree with that.
Yeah. I mean,
also we're saying this the weekend of Easter.
Yeah, exactly. We're doing Fallen Angels the weekend of Easter.
Great performance by Jesus this weekend.
Or Willem Dafoe, depending on who you think it is. Last Temptation of Christ. Yeah, he's in the last. He plays Jesus in the Last Temptation of Christ.
I was thinking JC, Jim Caviezel.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing controversial that comes out of that guy's mouth, right? Mm-hmm. Are they making that sequel?
Passion of the Christ 2.
Yeah.
Electric Too Boogaloo? Fast to Passion.
Yeah. You were about to say the other. I know what you were about to say. I'm not even going to. No, but they're making it. I don't even know
what you thought I was about to say. I kind of said what I wanted to say. Too fast. I mean, sure.
Sure. That's what I thought you were going to go with. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't know if they were making it or not. Maybe there'll be a surprise at this year's Cannes Film Festival.
I mean, that's cool. I'm big.
Actually, I have the lineup.
I'm big on the Apostles. I think they're awesome.
Oh, you're big on Apostle. Well, who's your Apostle? Who's your number one?
We can't get into it right now. We can't get into that right now. We don't have time.
No, we're not. Because we're here to talk about Wong Kar-wai.
Yeah.
We're not here to talk about the Bible. All right? We're talking about Fallen Angels, which is, what is this, the fifth film in our Wong Kar-wai movie series?
Yeah, we're halfway
done. Right in the middle. We're halfway there. What feels like a series that we've been doing for a long time, but actually it's only our fifth week.
Yeah.
This movie is set in Hong Kong. It's a Hong Kong crime drama that follows the life of a hitman hoping to get out of the business, his female partner, and many other people. That's just a kind of a small description of what this movie is, Jay. But this movie came out in 1995. It's coming off of the heels of Chungking Express 2.
Mm-hmm.
After Fallen Angels had
Chungking Express 2. Was that the sequel?
Well,
you know,
if you want to get technical, this is kind of a continuation of Chungking Express.
Well, we will talk about
We'll talk about that. But this is coming off of Ashes of Time as well. This is a little bit more darker, more interesting, a little bit more experimental. Jay, got to tell you, movie's a little fishy, if you know what I mean, because it's got that old fisheye lens that's used in a lot of
this has got a wide lens.
It's got wide. You can see everything.
I would not go so far as to say fisheye, but it's got a wide lens.
A little fisheye.
No. Go to Yorgos for that. Go to Yorgos Lanthimos for your fisheye. I'm thinking wide.
It's little. I don't know, but it's pretty inventive, wouldn't you say? Like this is a very inventive film.
You use the word experimental, inventive. Yes, all of those things.
Yep. And so I'm curious because when we were texting behind the scenes, any listener and now our viewers know that when Jay's really excited about something, yeah, there's one word. Movies. There it is. So I got the text that this might be one of those instances where you bring
you're really not burying the lead. You're exposing the lead here.
I'm exposing the lead. So I'm curious. Was that a factual statement or were you lying to us all?
Yeah, Ryan.
Hand on a Bible. You got to tell the truth.
Can you tell me the last movie that I watched twice in a week in preparation for a podcast?
That is a good question. It was definitely on our movie series.
It was a movie series movie?
Mm-hmm. Was it sometime last year?
No, longer ago than that.
Longer ago than that. Ace in the Hole?
No, Shortcuts.
Shortcuts, that's right. Really? I felt like you watched Ace in the Hole twice.
The last one I remember doing was Shortcuts, which I now consider one of my 10 favorite movies of all time. I have watched Fallen Angels twice in the last 3 days.
Okay.
Because I think this movie is that good. This is, you mentioned its comparisons to the Chungking Express, which are abundantly there. This movie, I would say, is sort of the dark matter version of the Chungking Express.
Yeah, this is like a light version. Or, I mean, the Chungking Express is like the light version of what this movie is. This movie is dark. Like this movie is deep.
Yes. This movie is very dark. I really appreciate the depths of life that this movie is willing to go to. This might be a little along the lines of that cynical Jay that we have come to know and love or hate. I don't know. If you've listened to this podcast
it's up to you to figure it out.
It is much like the characters in Fallen Angels. You've got to decide whether you love or hate your existence as you listen to this podcast. But this film, to me, I'll tell you one thing I absolutely adore about it is its establishment of the Wong Kar-wai universe, right? It is such a self-referential film in ways that I find captivating. Not overly cute, but very interesting because Wong Kar-wai is at a very interesting point in his career while he's making Fallen Angels, because he's had these experiences that he found pretty miserable, and he's kind of found his groove with this film that he made in the shadow of that misery. And so I think there is a commentary on his process and the entire world of Hong Kong cinema in this movie. And I think that comes largely through his own expression, through the self-referential elements that we get in this film. You hear about one of our main characters here has become mute because he drank expired pineapple. You know, we talk about what is the expiration date on love and other things. It is a really fascinating examination, not just of our characters here, but also of Wong's process itself, which I find to be really compelling as a piece of filmmaking, as a piece of storytelling. And in addition to that, Ryan, you know I love some visuals. And oh my God, is this one of the most visually captivating films I think I've ever seen. They used a lens. You describe it as a fisheye lens. I actually never got that sensation watching this movie. I did early on. That's really interesting. That did not cross my mind watching this. I just thought, wow, this is an incredibly wide lens that I think captures.
It might be. It might be just a wide lens, but it was very. It
just
reminded
depends on
me
what
of
your
that.
definition. It fisheye lens really is in the eye of the beholder. It's in the eye of the viewer.
It felt
It's
like it felt like I don't mean to cut you off, Jay.
no,
It
you're good.
it felt as if not like when I was watching the card counter a couple years ago, but it felt like that.
See,
that
that
little bit
one
of that
is
that's
crazy.
wild. But this is it felt that similar sort of uneasy feeling that you have because it's non-traditional in a sense, and it's unlike anything we've seen so far in his filmography. That's for sure.
Oh
What
yeah,
we've
for
watched.
sure.
And
Yeah,
it's a different way to introduce you to a similar world that you're mentioning that we've seen before, even in a film that we reviewed 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it is not completely untrodden territory for Wong Kar-wai, but I think it's also being told in a much grittier, more violent world than anything that he has produced so far. And
Right.
I find that to be kind of the most fascinating mode that he has operated in since we started this series, and also the one that appeals to me most. And it all comes down to, at what point does a wide lens become a fisheye lens? Because I never thought of this as the fisheye lens. I was just like, it is incredible how much depth they are able to get in one shot here, right? And I was reading some interviews, and Wong Kar-wai and Christopher Doyle were like, yeah, making this movie was weird because we had to get the actors so close to each other, or else it looked like they were really far away from each other.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting, and just thinking about how these movies are made when you get an idea like that in your mind. I personally find that to be something that enhances my experience when I read about it afterwards. And it is just from the jump, you have this handheld, this is a largely handheld camera with this extraordinarily wide lens that truly does make it feel like this experimental film. But what's so great about it is that it is the intersection, more than any movie we've seen so far, of kind of the traditional genre picture and the artistic mindset of Wong and cinematographer Christopher Doyle here. Because in many ways, this is a genre movie. This is a mob movie in many ways, but it's also this movie that incorporates so many of the things that we've seen so far from Wong that we have come to associate with Wong, the sense of longing, this search for love and acceptance, and certainly in the face of violent acts and violent surroundings. And in a filmography full of characters who are unable to express their emotions, how do you take that to the max? You have a character who literally can't speak because of one of the trademarks of Wong Kar-wai's films. So it's basically saying, look, I am taking my practices, my sensibilities to the extreme in almost every way with this film. And I love that maximum expressionism. I think that is a marvel to watch. And for some people, they might say, oh, well, this is a far less subtle film than we're accustomed to from him. But for me, the visual elements of this film and also the real, I think, sense of place and sense of setting, the style. I saw, when I was reading my book about kind of some critical ideas on this film, a lot of people said this is his most style over substance film. And what I would argue opposite to that is that it is his most stylish and also contains as much substance as his other films. Because I think this really does. I think this is a special movie. I would say it's my favorite of his so far. I mean, I don't watch many movies twice in 3 days.
That's true.
We
don't have the time.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously it was partially because we were doing this review. I was like, I really want to have my ducks in a row here because I do think I like this movie that much.
Yeah.
But it was also because I really loved watching this movie and I found it so layered. And I think it's hard to see the last shot of this movie and not be like, oh my God, I want to watch this movie again. Because the last shot is a gorgeous summation of what this movie is about. And this film, as much as it does lean into some of Wong's favorite themes, it also has some new introductions here. We have familial love, fatherly love here that we don't have in his other films, which I think is one of my favorite pieces. I love this movie. I love this movie so much. It's like I've loved every Wong Kar-wai movie so far, and then it's like let's put this right in Jay's lane, and then make a Wong Kar-wai movie. This just feels so. This is what I love in a movie in so many ways. It's my favorite one so far. I really love this movie.
Oh, okay, well that's great. It's great.
Is this gonna be another Shortcuts where it's like Jay loves it and Ryan's like,
I don't dislike this movie.
Interesting. All right.
But I don't love it. And I'm kind of mad that I don't love it. Because this is kind of a movie that I would love, but something didn't work for me on the watch. I felt a little disconnected from it. I felt
it's a cold film compared to what we are used to from Wong.
It is, but I also felt a lot of what those complaints were at the time. Not the complaints of him being kind of self-indulgent and not breaking new ground. I think that those complaints are completely invalid and just not really constructive when it comes to what this movie's doing. I just feel like the movie itself structurally is a bit too disjointed for me to emotionally connect to it. It's one of those films that we talk about in these movie series. We really do. We dive into a lot of these movies, Jay. You know how like nowadays we get the whole directors want to make something about their childhood thing, and like every director's got to do it, right? And some directors do it fantastically, and some directors are just like, you're sitting there and going like, dude, what are you trying to say? You know, lady, what are you doing?
This is a very vague version of that. This is that.
It's a vague version of that, but I wasn't even going to that genre, that faux genre that we've been getting. I'm like a faux genre of the whole, you know, that he's kind of adopted, and then I think Western audiences sort of start adopting. You know, we talked about it a lot with Soderbergh and a lot of other directors too, of the theme connecting random characters and random people together, right? The hallmark of a
well, in Hollywood, this was all Tarantino.
This was Tarantino, but this is also like, you know, then Soderbergh does it with like Traffic, and then of course freaking Crash. We've talked about these, you know, even when we talked about the Wachowskis, like Cloud Atlas is definitely a movie about that.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
for sure.
that is a movie about that within the like, it's like the highest order. That's taking it to extremes.
Connection of stories, centuries
for
apart.
time, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
in different galaxies.
Yeah. And I think that what's so interesting about it is like Chungking Express. It's hard not to kind of compare him, because this last sort of story, or one of these stories, especially the one I think about, I think it was the hitman and the assistant primarily, correct? That was supposed to be the third story in
yes,
Chungking
this was
Express.
an unfilmed portion of the original Chungking Express script.
Yes. And so they were going to kind of incorporate that about like the highs of love, and then sort of like the pitfalls and the despair that can come with it too, the heartbreak that comes alongside of it. And it kind of, in a lot of ways, fits the opening coda, or the opening story of Chungking Express, the first 20 to 25 minutes of that. Though that is more melancholic than this is sort of tragic and depressing and dark. Yeah. That's still got a very, I wouldn't say cheery, but it's definitely more in the tone of what you get for the rest of that movie.
But I also think you and I both find that first portion of Chungking Express not entirely successful, or at least originally confounding.
Yeah, it's a bit.
It makes more sense afterwards.
Yeah, it makes sense when the whole film is done. And
right.
But in the moment, you're sitting there kind of going, what is this connecting to?
Where are we going here?
Where are we going with it? Wow, where are we going? But then if you watch this film, that kind of connects into that and everything. And I think that for me, the I guess fourth story, which is kind of created here about this mute convict on the run, essentially, right? That storyline, as it's sort of weaved through and then kind of fit perfectly right at the end, which I do think you're right. The ending of this movie is kind of great. And the final shot is impeccable.
Next level, great.
The journey to get there for that kind of story to kind of meld through and some of that was what I kind of struggled with, because for me, this idea of this sort of assassin and his associate, and this sort of conversation about their work, and really, Jay, the ramifications of said work and what that does, not on on just like the mind, but on the soul, right? And how it sucks it dry, right? And it becomes mindless as the more he does it, and there is no enjoyment in it. And because you make in almost, it's like by the end, it's you want the sweet release of death so that you can feel as humanless as when you're creating these acts. Like, I find it really fascinating that Wong Kar-wai here is using this song of like, what is like the line in the song, like, I'm a cool guy or something like that, or I'm cool. And yet, like, if you go inside the brain of this protagonist here, this is far from it. You know what I mean? And these are maybe his most impressive visual gun battles, or at least executions or action sequences.
Violent.
They're the most violent and the most focused. That's what I would say. They're the most focused of all of them, and yet they're also the most emotionally chaotic, if that makes sense. And I kind of am so impressed by that storyline, the sort of damage that this relationship has had, even though there's barely a relationship there, right? And it's the inverse of kind of the main relationship you see in Chungking Express. And I like that dichotomy there and the duality between those. But unlike Chungking Express, the other elements surrounding it and sort of the connective tissue, I was sitting there with this one going like, yeah, it kind of leads to a pretty cool and interesting place, but I don't necessarily need this throughout the movie. And it feels almost repetitive at that point, because they're kind of going for the same goal
of the Hochimo mute character.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. I find those two stories rhyme in such profound ways.
See, I think they rhyme in similar ways, at least when I was watching it. And so it's not something that deters the movie on a whole, but I think it's one that on a second viewing, I might be able to get over. Right now, it's at like a 3.5 out of 5, but I know that in time, this could potentially grow up for me. It's just right now, I was kind of like riding the high of Chungking Express, Ashes of the Time. Go back to the review last week if you want to hear my thoughts on that. I was very eloquent.
You love that movie. You would not.
Very thorough. That's the most thorough I've ever been on a review. Okay, let's just call it like it is. All right, it was very thorough. I said the things I needed to say on there. I knew what I was doing there. So, but no, this is good. It's good. I wouldn't call it fine. I think it's good, but I don't think it's great. But I know that you connected with it more personally than I did. And yeah, I think it does feed more a little bit into your bone than it does mine.
Yeah, I would say it does, and I think more than anything, it is those visual elements for me that really separate it. And we've talked about films in the past that you're like, oh, I think this movie's okay, and I'm like, I mostly think it's okay, but I think it is visually incredible. I am speaking, of course, of God, what's the Gore Verbinski movie?
A Cure for Wellness.
A Cure for Wellness. Yes, that was the film where I was like, Yeah, I know this movie doesn't really make any sense, but oh my God, did you open your eyes while you were watching this thing? It was unbelievable.
And what did
And
I tell you about that movie? Put it on mute in the background.
Yeah.
You're fine. But if you turn that thing on, holy hell, that thing is the dumbest pile of shit you've ever seen in your life. Like, it's just, it is really, really dumb. It's a dumb stuff. But this isn't that. But I agree with you. It isn't dumb on that level. But I will say, but I agree with you. Visually, this is the sort of kind of wild swings you want from a director after another low point. You know, like they made Ashes of Time. Obviously, he goes and makes Chungking Express, but then Ashes of Time comes out. So now you got to kind of face the music of that whole monstrosity and everything that you didn't like to do. Had to recut it many years later, whatnot. You know, kind of a monocle of success, not really that much. And so you kind of creatively, like, still kind of at a low point, wouldn't you say? And you got to come out here and shake things up a bit. You can't do, you know.
Well, he's still kind of riding the wave of Chungking Express, I think.
True.
'Cause I think even at the time it was like, you know,
he's riding the
Ashes
stages of
Time.
grief. You know what I mean? Like, he's riding like the stage of like acceptance and like, okay, you know, like when you get mad at something, you're like, I'm not that mad about it. And then later on you get like really depressed. And then afterwards you get like optimistic. You know, you get cheerful, then you get depressed, and you get optimistic. You know what I mean? That's kind of where he's at.
Certainly in the world of Western cinema, Chungking Express was the one that really put him on the map. And then I think there were other films that have been more lauded in the United States specifically since that film, but this is the one for me, and maybe we still got more to talk about, and some of which I haven't seen yet, but this film to me is an encapsulation of everything that he has been trying to say, and also a reflection on his entire process and his work to date. And I love that about it, and the visual audacity of what they're doing with this movie. I again read some interviews with Wong, and he was like, you know, the hardest thing about making a bunch of movies in a row is that if you don't change up your crew, you'll start repeating yourself. And what this movie is, at least in part, is a reflection on that process, and a reflection on the idea of repeating yourself by repeating himself. And I think at the time, and still today to a degree, a lot of people dismissed this film because they were like, oh yeah, this is like a greatest hits movie. I don't know what you think of this. And I disagree wholeheartily with that. I actually think some of his prior films are more similar than this movie, because you have
we talked about it when we talked about it, right? You know, like some of those movies, it felt like he wasn't, I wouldn't say unfocused, but this movie, I agree that this is, I mean, you've heard me say it already, that it is a bit of like a high wire act. He's kind of melding things together, and it is a marriage between it and Chungking Express of how to do that. I think that's
tonally,
tonally they're, you know, completely different, but structurally kind of the same, you know, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. They share DNA. Let's just
they certainly share DNA. I think Chungking
like with
Express
his
is
first
much
two
more
films,
bifurcated. Like this story ends and this story begins, and that's kind of that.
Yeah, that's more traditional. This is more
a lot more.
Yeah, this is more going down like a highway, and then you take a little exit ramp, and then you go up, and you're still driving a little straight. You know what I mean? This is like, well, we'll take a little bit of turns here and there, but then we're going to still get back on that same road by the end. You know what I mean? And it's the same kind of destination for both films, to be honest with you. They have these incredible, like, exhilarating endings that you want to watch the movie again when you're afterward.
I think they're very different endings, actually, but we can.
No, I think the feeling that you have, because when I watched the end of Chungking Express, I'm like, I want to watch this movie again. And then when you watch this, I wasn't like, I'm never watching this movie again. It's not Ashes of Time or anything, but it made me go like, that didn't all the way connect, but I would give that another go, because that final shot is pretty impeccable.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
They are aesthetically. Yes, I 100% agree. Although I will say, Chungking Express to me is a much more hopeful finale than
Oh,
this
very
movie
much so.
is.
This
I
is
find
this is
this to be a pretty dire ending.
well, it isn't not hopeful.
I think it's. I
You may think
disagree.
this is bleak, but she kind of goes out there and says, like, at least I'm not alone. You know what I mean? I guess
in
that if
that
you want to look,
one moment, yes.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, and we don't know where that's going to lead or whatnot. You know what I mean? But one would, and it, I guess it goes back to the eyes of the beholder of this art. And do you think that that embrace is enough at the end? And will it continue, or will the cycle continue like you see in the film, where heartbreak will be found for her? And I don't know. You know,
Well, it is
one would hope. It's
the
desperate.
wonderful,
I
the
will give you
wonderful
that.
irony of that last scene is that these are two people who are so thoroughly in love with other people, and their
Yeah.
bond almost comes from that idea that they are hopelessly in love
Mhm.
with people that they will never be with.
Yeah.
Never in the sense of because they no longer exist, or never in the sense that that person will never be able to get over the person that they are in love with, who is different than
That they
the
lost,
person who's in
or-
love with them.
yeah. And that time, and that they won't have the time back.
Yeah, and I
You
think
know?
of the woman who has been crying on Ho's shoulder over the course of the film. The symmetry of the image at the end, where she is laying on his shoulder on the motorcycle, is undeniable. It is
Yeah.
this idea of, this is something that I find incredibly comforting, but it's not love. This is a temporary way to shield myself from the heartache that I feel at every moment of the day. And that is also reflected.
It's temporary.
also-
It's a
yeah.
temporary placement of emotion that
Yeah,
you
it's
want,
a
but
reprieve.
you're not getting. Yeah.
And you see that as well in the assistance scenes, where there's some wonderful parallels between this film and Chungking Express, when you see her sorting through the hitman's trash.
Yeah.
And
Almost like the apartment scenes.
yes, it's exactly like that. And it is just the dark mirror image of that film, where you have this woman who is helplessly in love and wants to get closer to this man who, by his very nature, by his profession, has to think very objectively about human life and existence. And there's also this wonderful parallel dialogue you have in some of their narration, where you hear the hitman say, he's talking to his buddy from grade school, and who's an insurance salesman, and he says, I don't want to talk to him about my policy because I have no idea who my beneficiary would be.
Yeah.
And then later in the film, you have Ho say, oh my God, I'm totally forgetting what he says. That is a perfect parallel to that idea. But he perfectly reflects that idea with one of his other lines, which I have here. And I'm gonna find
This
it.
is excellent video and audio
This is
commentary.
good podcasting.
Good content, folks.
I wrote it down and I
he
can't
read.
find it. But there are multiple instances of that wonderful mirroring dialogue that I will find at some point. I will say it because I noted it and I found it pretty profound. But it is, I think the connective tissue between the two stories is much stronger than it is in Chungking Express, a movie that, again, I said was a masterpiece on our review, and I like this movie even better than that. So just to kind of give you an idea of how much I adore this film. But
no, I agree.
It isn't just an exercise in style. It is a film that has a lot on its mind, both philosophically and emotionally. It's it's a really wonderful work.
I think Michelle Reese, her performance here is pretty impeccable, Jay. I mean, this is, I think of those just really aesthetically chaotic scenes where, we've seen, I don't think I've ever seen something like this to this extent of, you see a lot of films have their characters take pleasure in themselves, if it were, you know what I mean? And there is something so aesthetically beautiful yet tragic about what he's doing here from this character's perspective. I mean, you're talking about these two that in a normal movie, Jay, in a more traditional film, these two would probably just, have a connection or would hook up by the end or would, or that would be the story, is that the will they, won't they kind of thing. You know what I mean? But this is a dangerous profession, and he's sort of his inner monologues and conversations that he's has with the audience through narration, which I gotta say, never been really a fan of narration. I don't like narration. Sometimes
A
can
lot
be a
of
real
narration
harmful
in
thing.
this, so if you don't like
A lot
that,
of
you might not
narration.
like the movie.
No, but like he uses it really well to convey a lot of the emotions that these characters are unwilling to say to one another and also willing to say out loud to themselves. And this movie is about keeping those emotions in and it harming them. It really harms them, almost to the point of like he's with this other woman and she can totally tell that he's not interested in her because he's fallen for this assistant, but there's just this barrier that they can't seem to get through. And yes, you're right. There's a lot of those parallels and connections, which is why this story would have fit perfectly and does fit perfectly, Jay, with the central relationship in Chungking Express. You have these things of longing and wanting for one another, and yet in that it's playful and it's the other side of love. You know what I mean, Jay? This movie is the other side of that kind of love, where it's playful, mysterious, and cutesy,
in
and
many
all that
ways.
in there.
Yeah.
And this is the nagging feeling of not having the ability to express those feelings, and doing so it internally eats you alive. And I find that to be so fascinating when I read and like you're saying, people kind of just were like, oh, this is derivative, or oh, this is him trying to make the same thing. And it's like, no, this is to make a full arc about love or to be a master of storytelling. It's not all a bed of roses. It's not all, mamas and the papas. You know what I mean? Like it's gonna be some love is a dark, dangerous thing too.
Whereas the song in Chungking Express is California Dreaming, and this one it's Forget Him is the main lyric in the
Exactly.
repeating song in this film. So it's
and it's expressed
it is
in a message
to
to get her to understand. Yeah.
reflection of that movie, I think.
It is. But while yes, Chungking, that doesn't work really as a whole until the end and how it all kind of wraps up. And I do still think that those two stories for me, I guess that one's just more tolerable than this one that sort of connects in there and whatnot. The more we're talking about this movie it's making me want to see it again. And it is jarring. I mean, the directorial decisions up front. I mean, it's kind of one of the more wilder openings I've seen in our movie series too.
I mean, from the jump, I was in love.
I was like, what is he doing here? Yeah, it looks so different. You have these two talking about the negotiation of the terms of their relationship right up front. And one's in focus, the other's not. You have this wide frame, but then it's in black and white, but then there's a little bit of color, the smoke in the room. It's so aesthetically fascinating that you can't not look away from it. You can't not take something out of this. I mean, there's enough here. This is where I break that rule of A Cure for Wellness, a movie that's too stupid for me to get past the very pretty aesthetics and visual language that it's telling there, Jay. This movie is much more, this is a smarter film. This movie has a brain. and knows what it's trying to say. But also too, the aesthetic here for 1995, you're watching this and you're like, oh my God, how the hell did they get away with this? Now it is jarring at first. There's no question about that. And there's a little, and it is an adjustment early
And
on,
that
but
is what I love about it. To be clear.
but it tempers, I think, a little as the film goes on for sure. But it understands that like it's not going to be like an easy road this time, and there's him using visual language to convey also what he's trying to tell you beyond just the words on the page. So it's deliberate choices that I deeply respect. I deeply respect this movie.
Well, you talk about how it kind of fades away, the audacity of the visuals kind of fade away. How about the fact that they do the Schindler's List red jacket shot like 5 times in this movie, right? And
yeah, they do.
As the movie goes on,
that's
that
influence right there. Yeah,
yeah, and
only like 2 years difference from that, by the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So-
very close. And I was reading some of the Christopher Doyle interviews when they were doing this, and part of the reason that exists is because he was like, yeah, some of the film we put together was soiled, so we had to manipulate it in ways that would make it make sense in the movie visually. And so they did that to, in my opinion, great effect. I think that very much enhances those moments in the film. And it just, I think about the moment where the assistant is standing in front of the jukebox choosing a song that holds for so long.
Feels
so
like forever,
much
doesn't
longer
it?
than you would traditionally see.
Yeah.
And to me, that really implies this sense of the personal, the intimate.
Yeah.
In this film that is so devoid of intimacy, but is also much more explicit in its sexual desire, but almost in this very sad way. I mean, you see the assistant in the hitman's apartment, in Wong's apartment, and her desire to have him as a partner is made incredibly explicit. But in the end, it makes her break out in tears, just sobbing on his bed by herself. And it is such we talk about the sense of longing, the sense of yearning, this very much more subtle, implied sense of longing. Here, all of that sadness is made much more explicit. Not only is it more sexually explicit, more violently explicit, it is more emotionally explicit. These characters are exposed to levels that we have not seen in his movies before. And I understand that some of the great appeal of Wong's other work is that subtlety. But for me, I love the forwardness that allows him not only to put the emotions in the foreground, but to put his style more in the foreground and make this film so intensely stylish. You have this shot that is repeated multiple times over the course of the film where we have the bustling Hong Kong neon city juxtaposed by this crummy apartment. And one of the things I find most fascinating about the film is that our hitman main character is not living this life of luxury. In fact, at certain points, he goes into the business. He says, demand comes and goes with this profession. What is the worth of a human life? And there is no definition. It is a marketplace. It is a profession, and he is stuck in it. It is very hard to get out of. He is trying to find a way. And in the end, it isn't him being attached to his job that leads to his demise. It is him finally professing his loyalty to his assistant, who is madly in love with him, that leads to his demise. He would not have done this job at the end of the film that ends up killing him if his assistant had not asked him to do so. And it is his sense of loyalty, and perhaps you can come to the conclusion that it is his love for her that he is finally professing to, whether it's to himself or to her, that leads to his death. And there's a wonderful irony to that. It is a very dark irony. And it is an irony that is reflected in her sense of disillusion at the end of this film. Where we are treated to this shot that we've seen multiple times in the film of Ho driving through the tunnel on his motorcycle, which in and of itself gives this sense of longing and isolation and searching. Really is kind of the main thing that I think that implies. And when you have these two people together, they're not together because they have this sense of love for each other. They are together because they are both desperately searching for something that will satisfy them.
Yeah.
And I think that is, again, I'll use the word. I think it is profound. I think it is provocative. And I think it is entirely effective in ways that none of his previous films have been for me. And I've loved his other films, but this one's special to me. I really do find this to be a very special movie.
No, for sure. It's one that I really like a lot of it. I think that for me to get to maybe your level, even like it just a little bit more than I like it, that repeat viewing will help. I think
it's pretty plotless.
Yeah,
So
it is pretty.
In that regard, it's not going to really stick to you.
No, but I think also too now knowing what you're going to expect going in, you might be able to just connect to it more. Because that's the kind of thing about this is most of these, I'm just diving in. I'm not even like looking up what they are or what they're about. I'm just kind of plugging them in to the case. You know, we're on the other side of the box art for this, or the box of this series now on the Criterion box, which I'm just going to reiterate this again because Jay is absolutely right. That box is stupid. It
is absurd. It is like unfolding origami trying to get to your disc. It is.
I just want the movie. Yeah. And then I'm like being very careful because I don't want to break it. You know what I mean? Because then it's like, I mean, it's a pretty box.
It's a very pretty box.
But damn it.
But it just needs to be. It needs to unfold in 90-degree
manner.
Angles.
Yeah.
Not these triangles.
Yeah. Kind of like, you know what? Like the neon box. You know, when like the neon box a couple of years.
Well, just it needs to be a booklet. Is what it needs to be.
Yeah. Just be a book. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Or a box with sleeves in them.
Well, like isn't like that's like the Bergman box. It's a book, or
the Bergman box is a book.
One I don't like is the Fellini. That's like a vinyl. Almost.
Yeah, that one's tough.
That's tough. Varda's
just do it. I mean, do it like the Bergman, the oversized ones. You got the Bergman and you got the
Varda.
Godzilla. Those are just books.
Yeah. Those are just books.
And so is the Varda, I believe, is a book as well, right?
Yeah,
I think
there's
so many discs in that one.
Big. So many discs. Yeah,
but
yeah. No,
yeah,
I just got.
I understand why they were trying to make.
I get what they were trying to do.
More stylish, but
yeah. Sometimes the ambition doesn't need to be there.
It is truly like I want to while we're doing the series, I should just take the shell off and just not have to deal with that anymore. And also, this goes back to one of my biggest, and I've said this before in the podcast, one of my biggest Criterion pet peeves. Don't give me a fold out that turns into like this 3-foot long scroll. Just give me a book. Give me a little booklet. Let me leaf through the pages.
Or give me a poster.
Especially of the essays where it's like, okay, so I got to start over here and then I'll end up over here.
For our audio, it's like he's reading a scroll.
It is like, well, it's like a scroll
like a treasure map.
Sideways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like move the scroll to the other way. He's really using the visual media in that.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, but we're on the other side of it now.
We are. Yeah, we're on the I guess the Tone of the Young side, I believe, is the right side.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you're done, and then we will literally be done with it, and then we'll be just renting films at that point, because I think the last two films you have to like rent. So
definitely Grandmaster.
And Blueberry Nights is on Amazon, I believe.
Oh, I keep forgetting about Blueberry Nights. I mean,
can't forget about them blueberries. Can't do it. Can't.
Only.
I think he would like to. I think he would like to, but we're going to talk about it. Again, apologies to Nora Jones 2 weeks in a row. I apologize. All right, Jay. Any final thoughts you have before we wrap this one up? I know you got a ton of stuff over there still. Did you find your line? Did you say your line?
No, I can't find it. I'm
You can't find your
embarrassed.
line?
I am so embarrassed. What?
You
God,
just
I
that's
am-
like you just put it on the tee and then you're like, nah, I'm not gonna hit that ball after all. You know?
what is it that he says? Oh my God.
I can't remember.
I'm gonna figure it out while you're going through your final thoughts. But I don't know. I've spoken at length about this movie, about how special I really do find it. It is. I do. I don't know if y'all would agree with this or not, but I do consider myself the most visually oriented viewer of film, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong for that.
Of all
but
time.
it is
Yeah.
of all time, of any viewer ever. Yeah.
I mean, you didn't put a thing at the end of that, so I just put it there for you. You know what I mean? You
It
didn't finish
is
the sentence. Fill in the blank for you.
I think it is much more rare for a filmmaker to capture truly unique, jaw-dropping visuals than it is to capture compelling, very impactful storytelling. And Wong Kar-wai does both in almost all of his films, but I think he does both in this film as effectively as he's done in any other movie. And especially when you throw in the metatextual elements of his reflection on his own work and his reflection on how he fits into the world of Hong Kong cinema and commercial cinema, because this is very much in the ways that some of his earlier films were, this middle point of commercial filmmaking and art house filmmaking. And it's one of those films where if you tell somebody it is a gangster movie, you're not wrong.
Not wrong, but you're
also
leading
they
them down a
won't get
wrong
what
point.
they're looking for if they're looking for a traditional gangster movie.
He doesn't make those. He doesn't make traditional movies like that.
He does not
so-
make those. And even though this is his most violent film by a wide margin,
Mhm.
it is also,
Well-
to me, his saddest movie yet, especially because of that finale. You can walk out of Chungking Express and say, and my reading of that film at the end is, oh, they're gonna at least give it a whirl.
Yeah,
And my impression of this
out
movie,
for
and
dinner.
maybe other people will have different impressions. Maybe some people will say, "Oh, well, they are in such a similar place in life that they will find each other and continue to thrive together." But to me, it is like, this is a blip on the radar, and this motorcycle ride will pretty much be the beginning and end of it. And not only are they alone, and they're not in the same situation they were in, they're in a much worse situation, because the people that they thought they were so in love with are now completely unavailable to them.
Yeah, but
I
also
find that
too,
profoundly sad. And
Yeah.
it is. I every time we talk about these, I'm like, yeah, I love this movie because it makes me so sad. But it is. Everybody has their sensibilities, I guess, and sometimes those kind of movies really, really speak to me. And this one absolutely did that.
I think that for my final thoughts, to speak to the ending, because I agree with you. I know I spoke about it earlier, and that you could look at it as that. You could look at it as this is, if you want to interpret it as lollipops and rainbows by the end, because these two lonely people found each other, you could. Or if you want to be like you, Jade, this is just a blip on the radar, and it's going to lead them down a very sad path because they lost the person they love. But ultimately, I think that there's a middle ground. There's a third place, which is, in order to be able to move on and grieve, you have to be able to heal just a tad, just to be able to connect, to find something, foot in the door, perhaps, glimmer of light. Doesn't mean that they're going to have a house full of children or anything like that. But you got to be able to soak up that pain and be able to move on. And these two are in desperate situations, and they find each other by the end. And I think what he's saying, at least for me, it is, and that's what I kind of like about the ending a lot, is that I think he's saying that I don't know if these people will be okay. I think this moment is good enough to give them for the pain that they've been through. But it's up to them at that point as humans to be able to pick themselves up and move on from it, or let the grief and pain swallow them whole. I don't think he necessarily like leads him down either path. I think he does what a great director should do, which is make the audience decide, but ultimately leave it to the characters and leave it unseen as to where their destination lies. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of it, and that's kind of the brilliance of being in that despair. Even though he's a little bit of a softie on the middle side, sometimes like you can't
for
help
sure.
him, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a cop out or anything. I just think that he leaves it to, it's much like the ending that we talked about, I think a couple of weeks ago when we talked about Days of Being Wild. It's much more open. It's much, it's a little, it's definitely got hints of cynicism. It's definitely not as, you know, you know, California dreaming or whatever, but it is, I think it's more of a human approach to it. And I appreciate that. And yes, I think the MVP of this movie, besides Wong Kar-wai, is Christopher Doyle and his amazing cinematography that he has throughout
it's
this
crazy.
movie. This is, I think, his best work so far, by probably a country mile, just because it's him and Wong doing what I sort of
It's
expect them
certainly
to
the
do.
most audacious, the most.
It's definitely the boldest.
in
It's
your
the boldest.
face.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's we're trying something
It's the
different
most
here.
cinematography. he's
Yeah,
done,
it's
for
the
sure.
most. And sometimes
Which doesn't necessarily
the most,
always mean best, but for me in this instance, I think it does.
I think it is. I think sometimes it has to be to break the mold, to try something new, to try something different. We're going to see it over the next couple of weeks where they kind of take this approach the next couple of weeks. They start kind of doing different things, and they start to try to break it up. They get a little bit more experimental with their stuff, while also narratively, I think they focus in a little bit more. So, which I can't wait to talk about those films. But definitely, this is one that it is growing based off the conversation, Jay. That's for sure. At least give me that. I don't hate. It's not like last week. I did talk about this movie, for Christ's
I'm
sake.
trying to find this line so bad.
It's killing him. It's killing him, folks.
It is truly killing me.
But I know that JD and Brendan will see this film. They got thoughts up on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. Jay, that's going to do it for our review here of Fallen Angels. But you're not going to find that line, and it's just going to eat you. You're going to have to find it next week. Maybe you're going to have to watch it 3 times in order to have that line at the top of next week's show. But for everyone, you found it. Wait a minute before I wrap the show up, Jay. What is the line?
Wow, this is huge. Last second,
This is big.
what he reflects on is the way that his father loved, or the way that he made videotapes of his father, and how his father loved videotapes, and how he said in his future life he would like to send videotapes to other people, but he doesn't know who he would send videotapes to, which is certainly a reflection on filmmaking. I would also like to say this is one of the greatest uses of videotape filmmaking in any film ever, especially in the wake of a film that also did it really well just this year, just in 2022 with the Paul Mescal movie. Oh my God!
Oh, After Sun. I was like, what
After
are you
Sun.
talking about? Did I miss something in
but
2023?
what he says, whereas juxtaposed against the idea of I don't want an insurance policy because I don't know who my beneficiary would be, he says I don't want to try to send people videotapes because I feel like it would basically be a return to sender situation where I don't have anybody who I care enough about or who cares enough about me to chronicle my life or their life and reflect upon it with, which is certainly, I think, something going through Wong Kar-wai's mind as he's making these movies, and is he kind of shouting into a vacuum, and just the very nature of exposing yourself through art, for sure. But it's these echoes that you see in this film that are so profound. I've used the word profound like 6 times. I apologize. I need to bust out a thesaurus, but I do find this movie to be quite profound.
Well, there it is. There it is. He got it, and got it right at the last second. Also, what a sad note to end on, just like the movie, if you want to believe that. I don't know. It's a sad quote.
In
it makes
general,
you sad.
this is the great Jay special. It's like, yeah, I found this ending to be, pretty hopeful and optimistic, and I'm like, no, it's about the dark nature of optimism and how any sort of optimism will bury you into your own personal hell.
And I can't wait for Jet to get bedtime stories.
Yes.
It's going to be some really fascinating bedtime stories of the Love Better House. That's for sure. Well, that's going to do it for this week's review here on YouTube. You can like, review, subscribe. If you're on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, all those places, just listen to it, download them every week, listen to these shows. Our podcast is syndicated every week at Geekcast Radio and the Land Podcast Network. We also have patreon.com/InSessionFilm. You can also go to our website, find all that information there about the InSession Film Store, the InSession Film app, bunch of different things. You can go over to just InSessionFilm.com and you can go over there and find all the great writing from all of our writers over there. You can find the main show, which last week we talked about. What did we talk about? A movie star draft. That's what we did last week. This week we'll be having a review of Air, and we'll have something else crazy and fun to have on the main show. And then next week we'll be back for another review here on the Wong Kar-wai Movie Series. We'll be talking about Happy Together, which is highly regarded as another one of those Wong Kar-wai films that a lot of people really connect with. Yes, it's starting our Tony Leung sort of tribute here over the next couple of weeks. And so that's going to do it. Jay, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
No, just kudos to me for finding that line.
Yeah, good for you.
And darkness,
because that would have eaten you alive all week. What? What'd you say?
Darkness forever.
Darkness forever? Oh, okay.
We are all on a path to loneliness and isolation.
Good Lord. Anyway, have a great day, everyone, and a great week. And we'll see you all next time. Oh, my God. That was so dark.